You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where this time I have hit record, and therefore you will be able to hear what we have to say after a few minutes of just Ross and I talking into the ether. We are the Cricket Podcast, and we've got a two-parter for you today. We'll be starting with England and New Zealand in the T20s. They've just wrapped up yesterday with a 2-all series draw, and then in part two we'll be flipping continents and flipping formats and heading over to the Asia Cup and talking about the India World Cup squad, which has just been announced. And as teased, it's me and Ross. I'm joined by Ross. How are you, Ross? Apologies for my earlier blip.
It all happens, even after 500 episodes. There's still blips when we come to. And I'm really looking forward to talk about this. I think the England versus New Zealand series was some nice little warm-up games. I think it was kind of nice to see some new debuts in that. It was also good to see from the Asia Cup perspective there's been a hell of a lot of rain. There's also been the Afghanistan team not being able to use a calculator correctly and then blaming other people. And then you've also got India naming a relatively conservative World Cup squad. They've had I don't know if it's fair, but a testing 12 months, testing 18 months. There's an awful lot of pressure on Rahul Dravid to bring home the World Cup, especially on home soil where they are clear favourites. And they've I feel like they've played it safe, but we'll get into the reasons why afterwards. Because Max, it's September. And that means there's new copy for us to read out for our wonderful sponsors, Manscaped, because fresh ball fall is upon us. And you need to be in the festive spirit, Max. Light a candle, set some pumpkin spice, and make sure your balls look nice. With the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. Nature may clear the leaves of their trees, but you'll need Manscaped's help to get you ready for that sweater weather. Get your pant puppies prepared for cuffing season with a trim as refreshing as a fall breeze by going to manscaped.com and using code TheCricketPod for 20% off plus free shipping. That is code TheCricketPod for 20% off plus free shipping. Max, cricket.
Before we get to the cricket, have you ever referred to your balls as pant puppies?
Never, actually, never.
No.
But, perhaps I will, and maybe some naming is required. I always find dogs are great when you've got kind of old man names or old women names. So maybe one testicle could be Dorothy and another one could be Keith.
Pant puppies, Dorothy and Keith. That's right. We'll go with that. Yes, cricket. And speaking of old men, when this T20 series started, England were sort of making New Zealand look a bit like old men. They're a side that they're always there or thereabouts, aren't they? Semi-finals, finals, obviously World Test champions. Not this time around, but obviously previously. And maybe we were thinking, are they coming to the end of their cycle? Trent Bolt wasn't there, but he's, now only playing white ball cricket. Tim Southey, guys that have been, they've been around the block. There's no Guptill anymore, no Ross Taylor. We're looking at some of the fresh faces, and is it, are they as good as they were? And it sort of started off that it looked like no was the answer, as England raced into a pretty commanding 2-0 lead in the series with some pretty impressive performances from new and old boys alike. But New Zealand never particularly written off, and they came roaring back into it. They finished up with another big win last night to tie the series 2-2, and it was a little reminder, I suppose, that England aren't maybe not necessarily the force they once were. Obviously, Butler wasn't playing yesterday, and it's they've been playing around with the team a bit. But it was nice to see New Zealand come back. But this series hasn't been about the cricket, has it, Ross? It hasn't been about the cricket that's been unfolding in front of us. All anyone's been talking about, all the coverage is about who's going to play in England's World Cup squad, which is a bit odd, isn't it? Because it's a T20 series, so that's slightly strange. But everything's been about whether David Millan's chewing up too many balls, whether Harry Brook should be in the one-day side. Why is that? What do you make of the way this has been sort of billed, I suppose?
So I think this is all they're glorified friendlies, aren't they? These series and the one upcoming against Ireland is much the same. I think it's very much a case of we're warming up. We're in pre-season ahead of the World Cup, and I think people are looking for meaning in life. Max is where I see this, and when it comes to some relatively pointless T20 games, they're kind of trying to read between the lines, and sometimes when you read between the lines, there's fuck all there. People they're still writing as if there is information there. So I think here, David Millan's position. David Millan has been a steadfast part of England's ODI squad. He's done ridiculously well in that time, I believe. You've got kind of the replacement for 1, 2, 3, and 4 with David Millan can bat anywhere in that top order, and that flexibility and the fact that he's hit runs in those different positions is really, really important. Harry Brook is a prodigious talent, right? I think we were all surprised to see him omitted from that squad. I said before that I didn't think that Milan was actually the one he was vying for a place with. Actually, I think it's more kind of the Liam Livingston type role in the middle of the batting lineup, and because Harry Brook doesn't bowl spin, I think there was a question mark around. Well, actually, we're not going to bowl his medium pacers in ODI cricket. Why not? I suppose I literally saw him bowl at Edgbaston against Steve Smith. He didn't do too badly of a job. So I think there's just some question marks around who's actually in question marks here around the place in their team, and I don't think 4 pointless T20 games against New Zealand, as much as they were fun, and I thought actually there was some really good cricket on show, also some really bad cricket on show. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference to England's thinking. I think today they've even announced that Zach Crawley is going to captain the series up against Ireland, I believe, and Harry Brook's been drafted into that as a cover for Johnny Bairstow, who's potentially got a shoulder injury, but it's not deemed to be World Cup kind of damaging. So I think it's been a good series. I think people are putting meaning where they don't probably need to put meaning on it, and I think if England camps are anything to go by, they've got a pretty clear view on their head, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have announced Ben Stokes, right? All the rumours wouldn't have been happening in August unless they'd made that decision already. And so I think it's all people trying to sell papers.
Mm. Are you buying that reason for Harry Brook being drafted into the one-day squad against Ireland, or is it as media pressure already got to their heads? Because it's been the first thing anyone's ever said since he scored 100 in the 100. Everyone was like, "Why is he not in the one-day squad for the World Cup? Look at what he's done in this even different format from T20, even more far removed format from one-day cricket." So I mean, I know Johnny Bairstow does genuinely have a bit of a shoulder niggle, but do you think that's a smokescreen?
Potentially, if he ends up in the squad, I'm not surprised by any stretch of the imagination, right? I think but if you look at the performances in the last 2 games, he's got scores of 4 and 8 in T20 cricket. Like you're going to fail plenty of times in that. He got, I think it was like 60 odd in the second game, and so again, the explosiveness of him and the talent that he's got, I think, is unquestioned. But again, in the IPL this year, and I know it's a different format, but he didn't have the best of times. He had that 100, which I think was a really good 100, but actually struggled an awful lot against the turning ball. Didn't really have the best of times, kind of opening up, etc. So there is that part where they're trying to think around the balance of the team, and sometimes you just have to shift a few things and make space. I think they will be worrying about some of the fitness of the other players. We've talked about Livingston. Livingston has fallen off a cliff when it comes to, I think it's what the language you used in the WhatsApp chat to me earlier, in terms of his output with the bat. But he does offer something with the ball. And I think that having that balance in the team is really, really important for a World Cup. The parallel I can draw here is Moeen Ali in 2019. England went in with a plan. Moeen Ali was a clear part of that. And actually, Moeen Ali wasn't performing. And he pretty much sat on the bench for most of that tournament, if my memory serves me correctly. But that was in England. Different conditions, didn't need another spinner. Adil Rashid is kind of the leading spinner here. And again, it's just because of the conditions, because of where it is, I can see England. I understand where England are coming from. So yeah, if he ends up in the team, he ends up in the team. If he doesn't, who cares? Like, it's going to be a really, really tough tournament to win. I think England have got an awful lot of talent, and are you really going to say that Harry Brook's not going to play the next 4, 5, 6 World Cups? No, he's obviously going to play for them, right? And this is the
no
bit
need to
of
rush it.
Yeah, and if someone was to turn around and say, would you prefer to have Ben Stokes in your team or Harry Brook? At this point in time, for this World Cup, Ben Stokes's kind of aura, ability, etc., is still ahead of Harry Brook, and I don't think that is questionable right now.
Yeah, I think the other point to make is I think you've mentioned it. You know, you're looking for balance. It's also, I mean, this is a squad. This isn't you're not picking an 11. Like, if Harry Brook isn't in the first 15 that they're thinking of, then do you want to then be drafting him straight into the 11 off the back of some performances in some T20s and the 100? I mean, no, unless he's scored 150 4 times in a row or done something completely ridiculous, then you shouldn't be changing your plans for your first 11 based on that. And then you have to look at, like you say, like what are you trying to do? What backups do you want? What do you want to take with you to India to fill the gaps? And obviously you've got to think about the bowling. You've got to think about backups for the seamers who are made of glass. So we're going to need at least 2 or 3 backups for them. And then you think about sort of what England's one-day side has looked like in the last 4 years, I suppose, since winning the World Cup, and what England had before Morgan retired and before Stokes retired temporarily, was a side that could absolutely blast it at the start, but if things got on top of them, they had every gear that they needed.
Yeah, the fail safes, right?
Yeah, so you got Owen Morgan can just knock things around. Ben Stokes can shut up shop a bit if you need to. Joe Root obviously he strikes at like 85 and averages 50 without seemingly doing anything, because he's just magic, and that's something that England immediately missed when those two lost, and we ended up with this middle order that if it fired could be scoring 500 runs with Bairstow, Butler, Livingston, Moeen Ali, Harry Brook, and it was it was crazy. It looked like it could be record breaking, but actually you found that if you lost a couple of early wickets, it's really fragile, and he's sending in Liam Livingston in the 18th over, which is not what you want at all in a one-day side. So I think having Milan in there, sure, he's not Owen Morgan, he's not the same player, but it fulfills a similar role, and you have to think about the structure of the side. And I think people have got a bee in their bonnet about David Milan, haven't they, for whatever reason? But he's been a phenomenal player for England.
He does come across like a bit like a golf pro, doesn't he? Like, when you like, I'm rubbish at golf, but when you've been at a golf club, I'm just going around and you just got this guy turns up in his Jag, and he's just like, I'm here to play just by himself because he's great. It's just like, okay, that's really, really fun. I think the person who I think on the previous podcast when I was saying like who are the questions, I think it was Livingston in there, but also Jason Roy. Jason Roy is not the same Jason Roy as the one from 2019, right? But there is still a bit here. They've gone with experience. Harry Brook is not experienced, and that I think that if their prerequisite is we're going to India, where it's really difficult to play, we're going to play in some really hostile kind of atmospheres, and that every game is a massive game. We want people who have dealt with that occasion. Harry Brook is more than likely can deal with that occasion. He's shown what he can do, etc. Is he good enough to be in this World Cup squad? Yes. Will I be surprised if he's in the World Cup squad? Not even slightly. But I do think all this, hyperbole around it is a bit too much at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Roy's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, his form in T20s lately has been bad. Like it's been really poor. But he's played a few one days, and his recent record's really good. And it's been a lot of it's been away as well, away from home. I think he played, was it Bangladesh? He scored 100 there. So again, when you look at sort of his recent record in ODIs, then there's an argument for why he's in there. And I think it sort of portrays a bit of an issue with the calendar as it's become, the cricket calendar. Like, you're basically picking an ODI squad, and people are saying, well, look how good this person's doing in T20. They should be in the side. We barely play ODI series anymore, and when we do, no one cares. None of the players that play in the one-day team actually want to play there because they've just had a 5-match test series and they're knackered and they want to go home. And who do you want to bus out to the middle of nowhere to play a 2-game ODI series at the end of a test match? It's so that makes it extra difficult, I suppose, to keep an eye on who's doing well in the format you're actually playing. So a bit tricky, but I think so. You reckon if anyone's getting the chop for Harry Brook, what are you saying? Livingston?
I think, well, it's weird. It's really difficult. So if we go from a projected lineup, I think that's probably, you've got Jason Roy and Johnny Bairstow opening up. You got Davin Milan at 3, Joe Root at 4, Ben Stokes at 5. 6 is the Harry Brook potential position, right? So it's Harry Brook or Liam Livingston there. And then you'll have Moeen Ali at 7, Sam Curran at 8, Mark Wood at 9, Adil Rashid at 10, Reece Topley on 11.
Is Josh Butler playing?
Josh Butler, I've completely forgotten about Josh Butler, haven't I? So
the captain. It makes the point for you, doesn't it? Where does he play? Where does he go? What's the lineup? So is David Milan even in the side? Is he a backup opener? And then are you going to take Harry Brook as a backup opener? No, you're not. Like, he isn't. So I love
that serendipitous moment of that bit there. And then you're leaving out people who have played amazingly for England over the last couple of years. Anyway, Chris Wokes, elite level ODI player in England, untouchable. And I still look back to that England semi-final against Australia where we absolutely battered the Aussies, and Chris Wokes did so much damage at the top of the order. Reece Topley's been really, really good. David Willey's performed really well for us as well. So there was all these people who, you can only put 11 on the field. England have got an embarrassment of riches, and there are some people here who almost deserve their chance at regaining the mace or the World Cup, whatever. I can't remember if it's a mace. No, the mace is the Test Championship.
The mace is the World Test Championship.
Yeah. So
I think it's just an old-fashioned trophy.
Yeah. So I think I don't have a problem with it. I think it's really, really difficult for Matthew Mott and Josh Butler to make that decision on it. But it's not like it's not like it's going to be an absolute shocker, is it?
No,
it's not. If they're going to go, do you know what, we're going to drop Josh Butler and we're going to give Harry Brook the gloves. All right, people can be pissed off. But that's not happening.
Bairstow will be the most pissed off.
And that's what they used to inspire him to get runs.
Yeah. I think it's fair, and they've got their squad together for a reason, I guess. A quick word on Gus Atkinson as well, because it would be remiss of me not to mention him. He did well. He played 2 games. He took 6 wickets. Good on him. Well done.
Cars, I thought, did as well. Did well as well.
Ren Ahmed had a good go as well. So
and I think from a Kiwi point of view as well, they proved that they were absolutely shellacked in the first 2 games, and they came back, fought really hard, and they've got people coming back into that squad. I think Kane Williamson's been named in their 15, and he's a huge asset to have in that side, right? And they know how to win games of cricket, but again, with all these things, I think it might be a tournament too far for some of their players.
Yeah, maybe, but it is a reminder, isn't it, that they are not to be taken lightly. They've got players that can do serious damage. So
the fact they've ditched Martin Guptill for Finn Allen is also quite nice.
Finally, and Finn Allen finally sort of showing everyone the sorts of things he can do, because he's much promised, but often flattered to deceive. But a couple of good knocks, and exciting stuff. Right, very, very quick word from you, Ross. The other thing that was announced in the world of English cricket was that the ECB are going to pay the men and the women equal match fees.
Yep.
Tell me why that's good.
Well, it's about time, isn't it? Really, I think I think from a quality point of view, it's a massive statement. I think from a participation point of view and a position for the ECB to start to address some of their obviously huge issues, which have been well documented. And I think it's also the part where a lot of, I don't know, what's the word, almost like spectator readers will turn around and say, oh, well, the women don't bring in enough money compared to the men, so they don't deserve to get paid and all this kind of stuff. Look at what's happened with the 100. The 100 has had massive following, especially for the women's game. All of the women's Ashes was followed brilliantly throughout this summer. And there is that part. There is sometimes that tipping point into, do you know what? There's no excuses, right? The people who make these decisions, there is no excuses. I don't feel there's been kind of enough done to get to that position. And I think we've been kind of forthright on this podcast for a number of years that we need to be in that position where we are investing in the women's game. We are rewarding for it so people can make professional careers out of it. They can progress. And you can see the impact that the 100 has had and how great the England women's team have done. I think they're playing against Sri Lanka while we're recording this, actually. But they have done so much, and some of the players that are retiring now are very much leaving. What's the quote around planting trees so other people can enjoy the shadow? So that some of the players who are retiring, like Siva Brunt, like they've got a lot to be proud of, and this is their legacy. And I think it's something to be cherished and cheered. And don't stop here. That needs to be continued, and that is still got an awful long way to go.
Yeah, very nicely put. And I think you referenced the argument that a lot of people make when it comes to sort of the equality of payment between men's and women's sport, about how much they bring in, how much, how the size of spectatorship and all the rest of it. And I think what people fail to remember is that when it comes to men's sport, they've had a bit of a head start, haven't they, for about 50 years? So a bit of catching up. I don't think you can really argue it against that when in terms of how things have been in the past. And it's like you say, it's needed. It's a positive thing, and hopefully a lot of other boards will follow. But that's it for this half. If you're listening on the audio, or that's it for this video if you're on YouTube. And we will take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk Asia Cup and India.